Hi, my name is Ashton Hoff, and I'm here to discuss the Battle of Baltimore. The War of 1812 had already been raging for 2 whole years, and having recently burned down Washington, D.C., the British have set their sights on destroying Baltimore. In September of 1814, the British sailed up the Chesapeake Bay to the mouth of Baltimore's harbor and set plans to conquer Baltimore. The British forces were led by Admiral Alexander Cochrane and Major General Robert Ross. Baltimore had 2 years to prepare and set up batteries along the shore and placed chains and sunken boats blocking off the inner harbor. Admiral Cochrane and General Ross devised a plan where Ross's troops would land at North Point and march upon the city, while Admiral Cochrane would lead his ships to a naval bombardment of Fort McHenry and ultimately the city of Baltimore. Now let's head to Hampstead Hill, which is now called Patterson Park, to get more information. We're here on the top of Hampstead Hill, where American soldiers stood ready to protect the city from the invading British forces. Major General Samuel Smith got a militia from Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. In total, they had trenches that were built all along the park and a total of 34 cannons. The arrival of Commodore John Rogers and 350 U.S. Marines gave the city hope for defense. The name of Hampstead Hill later got changed to Patterson Park. After the fire in Baltimore in 1904, they dug up more cannons from the War of 1812 when they were cleaning up from the fire. Now that we've gotten some information over here, let's head over to North Point to get some more. We're here at the North Point Peninsula, where the British troops landed to take control over Baltimore. The Americans drafted every white male from 16 to 50 into a city force led by Major General Samuel Smith. Major General Samuel Smith sent out a small cavalry unit led by James Byes to watch for any landing parties, which gave General Smith more time to make the militia troops look much bigger than it already was. Major General Samuel Smith ambushed Ross's troops, which eventually led to Ross's death. When Ross was killed, his men went into panic mode, and so Colonel Arthur Brooks took over. The Americans eventually got outflanked by the British and had to fall back to Hampstead Hill, but not before they killed many British troops. Now, let's go over to Fort McHenry to get some more information. Hi, my name is Ashton Hoff, and I'm here at Fort McHenry with Scott Sheets. Scott, can you tell me more about yourself, please?
Well, Austin, I started here many years ago, in 1978, and as a park ranger, and I worked here for almost 40-some years. I retired in 2016. Now, my job here as a National Park Ranger, it was to take care of the fort and read as much about Fort McHenry's history as I can. So I spent a lot of time in the libraries reading books. And then I take that information that I get out of the books and what I learn about the architecture, the soldiers, what was the War of 1812 all about, and then I write my own books and have those published. And so one of the things I do here at Fort McHenry as a park ranger, now I don't have my park ranger uniform on with the Smokey the Bear hat, but what I do have is this. this is a coat, a militia coat that was worn during the War of 1812. It's a reproduction. And so this would give visitors who come to Fort McHenry to learn about the War of 1812 what a militia soldier looked like. So if you lived here in Baltimore in 1814, you would probably wear something like this and come down here to Fort McHenry to train, to be a soldier. And that's where we are right now in one of the barrack rooms. This is over 200 years old. This is where the soldiers lived and slept here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go through some questions that you asked of me, and we'll go from there. How's that?
That sounds good.
Okay.
The first question
Good.
is, did the flag that flew over Fort McHenry look the same as the first flag that was made in 1777?
It's a little bit different. The flag of the American Revolution, and Fort McHenry played a part in that as well, it's been described as a 13-stripe flag with 13 stars in a circle. And that's the most popular flag that people are familiar with, the flag of the American Revolution.
My second question is, what do the colors and stars on the American flag mean?
The stars on the flag, and the answer to that is in the Continental Congress. And then you read the words in the Continental Congress when George Washington was president. They specified what the stars mean. The stars is the stars in the new sky, in the new universe. It's there's 13 stars represent 13 individual colonies. So it's the new part of the new constellation. Now the red, white, and blue comes from the signing of the Great Seal of the United States, which George Washington came up with the idea. So on the Great Seal of the United States has the eagle on it, then it has United States of America, then it has some stars on it. That symbol is the colors of the red, white, and blue. Okay.
My third question is, after the war, did Francis Scott Key return to Baltimore and live there? And if he did, how long did he live there?
Francis Scott Key lived in Georgetown, Maryland. Now his house is no longer there, but there's a little monument there to say where his house lived. Now he was a very trained lawyer. He argued cases between the U.S. Supreme Court, so he was a very important guy. But he also was a very religious man of the Episcopal Church, so he wrote a lot of hymns that are still sung in church today throughout the country. So he's a very religious man, but he was a very good lawyer. And so what happened is a friend of his, Dr. Beans, was captured by the British right after they captured Washington, and Key went to President Madison. He went right to the door, knocked on the door, and said, I want your permission for me to go and get my friend Dr. Beans released. So he came to Baltimore and got aboard a small American boat and went out and tried to find Dr. Beans, who was being held on a British warship in the Chesapeake Bay.
My next question is, can you tell us more about the rest of his life?
Key never came here. He wrote it, he saw the flag, he wrote a song about it. What's interesting about that song is within 2 weeks after he published the song, every newspaper in the country published it on the front page. All 18 states had published the song, so it went right to the top of the charts. Everybody was singing it. And that's why that's important, because for the first time, that song made people look at the flag in a way they never looked at it before. They saw that as the new national symbol. And that's when you start seeing images of the flag, and people find flags outside their homes. That flag that Key symbolized became the new national ensign.
My next one is, I see you're in uniform. Can you tell me more about the militia?
Mm-hmm. This is a militia uniform that I made a couple of years ago. And it's a typical militia uniform. It's called a hunting frock. If you lived in the country and you had to go out and get some food for your family, this is what you would wear to go hunting. And this is very heavy because it's winter time. And so this is a hunting frock. And you would have one of these, and your dad would have one of these, and maybe your mom had one of these too. But it's very warm, so it's called a hunting frock. It's very not expensive. And so with this hat, I have my hat. This is a typical hat of the period. Now this one this is different. This has a little eagle on here that tells I'm an officer. And this white plume says I'm an officer, I'm the captain. And so this is a typical hat of the period. And then I also have my vest and my red sash. You see a red sash here. This signifies that I'm an officer. Now, I don't have my sword with me today because it's being polished. How's that?
The next question is, why Baltimore? I know the British were trying to win the war, but they seem to have hatred towards Baltimore. Is there a reason for that?
Mm-hmm. Baltimore, by 1812, was a major seaport. They built a lot of boats here in Baltimore. Boats like what we have today, the Pride of Baltimore. That's a reproduction of a very famous privateer, a privately owned warship that was built here in Baltimore in Fells Point. So Fells Point was a big shipbuilding industry. So when we declared war on England in 1812, these privateers, they're not pirates. A privateer is a licensed sailor, licensed by the federal government to go out and capture and destroy British merchant ships. Even off the coast of London, that's where these ships went. And it cost so much money to the people and merchants in London, they put pressure on the Royal Navy to come to Baltimore to destroy this nest of pirates, the seacoast. So they came here to destroy the shipyards. Baltimore is the third most important city in the country at the time because of the shipbuilding industry.
And then my final question, how many men were in the fort and what was it like?
Well, I'll give you an idea what it's like. This room that we're in right now is one of the 6 original rooms. This room dates back to 1798. And 16 men lived in this room, 4 men per bunk. And there are 2 types of soldiers here. The people who lived in this room were the U.S. Corps of Artillery, the regular army. You got paid $8 a month. You served for 5 years. And after the war, you were allowed to go home, and the government gave you, for your service, to help defend Fort McHenry, 180 acres of free land called bounty land. And later they doubled that to 300 acres. And so you could take, that's on a piece of paper. And you could take that, and that land was out in Ohio and in Indiana. So after the war, a lot of these people who had helped defend Fort McHenry and helped defend America went out to Indiana and Ohio to claim their land that the government gave them. Land was going for 50 cents an acre.
Well, that was all of my questions.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
You're quite welcome.
And this is one more question, but this is just me. I didn't tell anyone. After the war,
Those are the best questions.
After the war, when they still had the cannons, and it comes back to modern day, do they still ever use those cannons?
No, because they're historic cannons. Like these walls and these floors here are all historic. So we have to take care of them. But the cannons only last a few years before they're useless. But we use cannons here to help give demonstrations. So part of my job here is to fire the cannons at Fort McHenry.
So, but what if they made like newer types of those cannons, and do they use those?
Yeah, that's what they did after the War of 1812. These cannons were too old. They date back to the Revolutionary War. So they come up with new cannons. And those are the real big ones we see outside the fort today from the American Civil War period.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was all of the questions.
You sure? Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. My pleasure.